Good morning, everyone. Glad you're here at Fayetteville Christian School. We're really excited about hosting this event and them coming. And we're going to just get right to it. First thing we're going to do is have a reading from the book with some of our kids coming up here. And then Dr. Carson and his wife, Candy, going to do some question and answer. He's going to talk, and then we'll have question and answer, and then we'll have opportunities for some photographs and things like that. All right? So kids, do you know who this man is? Johnny Carson, so but didn't do that.
You can tell him that's your mom.
So he's a famous doctor, and he's helped save to heal a lot of people's lives over the years. In fact, he's the first person in the world to separate two babies who were joined together at the head with the brains. Dr. Carson ran for President of the United States and served as a member of the President's cabinet for 4 years, where he helped Americans, families get housing. Dr. Carson has authored many books for grown-ups, and one about his life was turned into a movie played by a famous Hollywood actor, all right, which you don't know who he is, so I won't say a name. He credits his career and success in life to reading books, and he's here today to read to you his first children's book, Why America Matters. Dr. Carson and his wife, Candy, are proud parents and grandparents and Americans. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carson to our school, and you guys come on up. Thank you. Fayetteville Christian School is a unique school. We have an all-volunteer staff while the kids are coming up here. Miss Jerry McDowell, how many years you been volunteering here?
39, I think.
39 years.
Now, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me out there as well? All right, excellent.
Can you hear me as well? Oh my, okay. I think we're good. Good.
Well, we're so happy to be here in Arkansas today. You know, I've been to Arkansas a number of times, always had very good times here. Pleasant, not too crowded, very nice people, even some Razorbacks. It's very Razorbacks. That's the emblem for the school.
The mascot?
Team. Mm-hmm. Mascot. All right, well, we're going to read a book for you today. This is actually the first children's book that I've ever published. We've done several books for adults. And the first book, Gifted Hands, actually was the one that the movie was made from. But this one is a special book about America, about some of the principles that made America into a great nation. Did you know that you happen to live in the greatest nation in the world? And, you know, this is a place where people's dreams can come true. They just work hard. You know, I came from a very poverty-stricken background. But still, because I live in America, could rise through the ranks. And you can become anything you want to be in this country. It really depends on you. You're the one who has the most to do with what happens to you. But also there are principles like faith. You know, we're a country that actually professes faith in God. Every coin in your pocket and every bill in your wallet says, "In God we trust." And there are godly principles like loving your neighbor.
Amen.
Not canceling your neighbor, but loving your neighbor. And then liberty. You know, one of the main things that drew people to America from all over the world was the fact that we had liberty. You could lead the life that you wanted to lead. You didn't have somebody telling you, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to go here, you can't go here. What a bunch of stuff. But anyway, America wasn't like that, and that's what attracted people. And then community, which means working together. You know, you don't even have to agree with everybody in order to work together. In fact, I always say if two people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. So it's okay to disagree with people, but you don't have to be mean. You don't have to be nasty. You don't have to try to cancel people. And then the last thing, life. From the womb to the tomb. So important. What's the most important thing you have? Your life. If you don't have your life, nothing else really matters, does it? So we're going to read this book to you. And this book was co-authored by Valerie Funstein. And we also had illustrations by Liz Ball, and they're beautiful illustrations. Flying high, both day and night, is waving to us below. America's flag matters. Why do you think that's so?
The flag's our country's symbol. We hold it dear to our heart, reminding us of values that have mattered from the start. Matters of faith, liberty, the freedom to cry, okay? Community, and life too. Pillars make our country strong and guide everything we do.
And you're going to notice in every page, every picture, there's a little eagle there. It's called Liberty Eagle.
Okay.
God lives in us through our faith, shining brightly our own way. Unseen yet, we know He's there, and faith matters every day. Faith's a matter of the heart. From the heart, we always lead, treating our neighbors nicely as we care for those in need.
Did you find liberty? I had trouble this time. Oh, there. There she is. Okay. The pillar of liberty matters because we are free to share our thoughts and feelings even if we disagree. We're all free to be ourselves and live life as we deserve. Liberty matters greatly. It's a freedom to preserve.
We take care of where we live, the neighborly thing to do. When communities matter, our great country matters too. We keep our homes, schools, and streets safe and clean as they can be, so that neighbors can be proud and live together happily.
The most precious pillar, life, God's finest blessing of all. Without life, nothing matters, from the big to very small. Our lives matter from the start, before any breath we take. Care for one another's health. Protect life for goodness sake.
Two sides of coins, heads and tails. Different, but the same worth. Just as the founder's voice mattered at our country's birth. Look at the proud bald eagle. Wings matter, both left and right. If same or if different, both are needed for its flight. Isn't that a cool illustration? The eagle, which is our symbol, has a right wing and a left wing. It can't fly with two left wings and it can't fly with two right wings. But together it can fly.
Your ideas are special. We don't all have to agree. I'm glad to know your feelings. That matters so much to me. I'll matter the same to you. Thank you for letting me share. When you take time to listen, it shows me how much you care.
This country is not perfect, and each day we grow some more. Does America really matter? In our hearts, we know for sure. Yes, America matters, and the 4 pillars do too. Live them each and every day to celebrate me and you. And that's the end of the book, young ladies and young men. We're gonna let you guys ask a question if you want to. But before we do, I want to tell you about something that's really special, something that each one of you has. And it's actually the thing that makes you who you are. Do you think your skin makes you who you are? No. Think your nose makes you who you are? No. Your hair? No. What about your brain? No. Yes, that's what makes you who you are, your brain. And you each have a brain, and it is the most special thing in the universe. Your brain has billions and billions of neurons. Those are the cells in the brain, hundreds of billions of interconnections. Your brain can process, get this, more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. Have you ever heard someone say, don't learn this, you'll overload your brain? You can't overload the human brain. If you learn one new fact every second, it would take you more than 3 million years to challenge the capacity of your brain. I don't think anybody lives that long, so you don't have to worry about that, okay? But that's what a brain can do. And there's a story, when I was practicing neurosurgery, there was a little girl from Connecticut, and she was in the schoolyard swinging, and she fell off the swing and hit her head, and she had a seizure. Anybody know what a seizure is? Yeah, it's when you lose control of your body and start shaking. And anyway, they said, no big deal. It's a traumatic seizure. Because she hit her brain, it just shook the brain up a little bit, and that's why she had a seizure. Don't worry about it. It probably won't happen again. But then she had 2 seizures. And then she was having 2 every day, and then 3 every day, and then 10 every day, and then 30 a day. And they didn't know what to do. The doctors in Connecticut sent her to the doctors in New York, and they didn't know what to do. They sent her to the doctors in Boston, and they didn't know what to do. But there was an old doctor there, and he said, I think she may have Rasmussen's encephalitis. And he says, with that disease, the seizures get worse and worse no matter what you do. And eventually you'll have to put her in an institution, and eventually she will die. And there's nothing you can do. The mother was devastated. The father was devastated. Their beautiful little girl die, and nothing they could do about it. But you know, the mother, like all mothers, would never give up. And she went to the library and she started reading all this. She could read about epilepsy and seizures and Rasmussen's. And she discovered some of the work we were doing at Johns Hopkins, which is where I was working. And we were doing a procedure called Cerebral Hemispherectomy. That means you take out half of the brain. And some kids who are having seizures that won't stop in any other way. And so they contacted us and they wanted to be evaluated. And they came down for an evaluation, and we felt that she was a candidate for that operation, to take out the left half of her brain. But when I explained to the parents the risk of surgery, that she might not be able to speak, She might be paralyzed on one side of her body. She might be in a coma, or she might die. They said, "Thank you, doctor, but no thank you. We don't want to take that risk." She might be in a coma or she might die, and we never even had a chance to say goodbye. So they took their little girl, seizures and all, back to Connecticut. And that Christmas, she was in a play, and while she was on the stage, she had a grand mal seizure. Arms and legs jerking, eyes rolled back, foaming at the mouth, incontinent of urine. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. They said, "We want that surgery," and they brought her back. And I performed the surgery, took out the left half of her brain. And everything went smoothly, except for one thing. She didn't wake up. She stayed in a coma. And a day went by, 2 days, 3 days, still in a coma. Parents were sitting by the bed, always grieving when I came by, wishing they hadn't done the surgery. I really felt badly for them. And a week went by, and she was still in a coma. 2 weeks, still in a coma. She used to love Mr. Rogers. Anybody ever hear of Mr. Rogers? Yeah. Well, it was a TV program, and he was a very friendly person, had a nice neighborhood, and always said poems and all kind of beautiful things. So they would play tapes of Mr. Rogers. Since she loved him so much, they thought maybe that would wake her up. Didn't wake her up. 3 weeks went by. She was still in a coma. Mr. Rogers heard about her. And he came all the way to Baltimore, to Johns Hopkins, to her bedside with all of his little puppets to try to wake her up. Didn't wake her up. 4 weeks went by. She was still in a coma. It was 2 a.m. in the morning. Her dad was laying on a cot next to her bed in our hospital room. And she said, "Daddy, my nose itches." And he was so shocked, and he jumped up and he ran out in the hallway. She talked, only had on his underpants. And everybody came by to see what all the commotion was, and came down to the room, and there she was scratching her nose. And you know, that was the beginning of a rapid recovery, and pretty soon she could walk, and she could talk, and she could do all these things, and it was time for her to go back to school. She wasn't having seizures anymore. But now they were concerned because she was missing the left half of her brain. That's the half of the brain that allows you to calculate, to do math. They said she'll never be able to do math. But do you know that little girl was so determined, she worked so hard, the next year she had the highest math grade in her class. And she did that with half of a brain. Can you imagine what you could do with a whole brain and some determination?
And you know, the reason why that he could do that operation, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. There's a phenomenon called plasticity. Can you say that with me? Plasticity. And if there's a disease process that's gradual, what happens is all of the functions on the disease portion of the brain migrate over to the other side. So you can take out half the brain and still be normal. So you can tell somebody, when you come up against a know-it-all, you can tell them, "I know something you don't know. I know about plasticity." Do you know what that is? Thank you.
I'll tell you something else you can tell people who are know-it-alls. Do you know what animal is the symbol of America?
Eagles.
The eagle. What kind of eagle?
A bald eagle.
A bald eagle, that's right. And why do they call it a bald eagle?
Because it is white and it represents the state.
That's close.
Yeah.
That's very close.
The head is white and it has no other color.
Because his head is white and the rest of them is a different color. That's very close. Most people think it's because it looks like he's bald, but that's not the reason. It comes from the Old English word piebald. And piebald means crowned with white. And we just shortened it from piebald to bald. So the next time somebody's an know-it-all, you see if they know that. That's very cool. If you young people have a question. Okay, young lady. How many kids do we have? Well, we were fortunate to be blessed with 3 sons. They're all grown up now. They all got married in 2011. So they're all celebrating their 10th anniversary this year. And we have 6 grandchildren and 2 in the oven.
This little girl had her hand
Okay,
up.
which little girl?
In the blue shirt? Yes. You had your hand up?
Whenever I was 6, I got to go see the 4 faces of the 4 presidents.
Oh, yes, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Was that fun? Oh, yeah.
Sylvester Well.
That was very cool, wasn't it? Going to see that. That was a great piece of artwork.
See the show of where they put the flag, folded the flag.
Ooh,
That was very
is
neat.
cool.
Well, you know, those 4 faces on Mount Rushmore are very important faces. You know, there's some people who try to say that, you know, there's something wrong with them. But you know what? There's no perfect people. But we had some great people who helped to form this country. And we should all be very grateful for that. This young lady right here.
Well, I fell off the swing, but I didn't have it. I didn't even cut my braid off on it.
So God blessed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And this young man right here, you had something. Real loud.
Did any of your sons serve in the military?
Did any of my sons serve in the military? No, none of them served in the military. My brother served in the military,
Your father?
and my father served in the military, and I was in ROTC.
This young lady over here.
All right, yes. What's my brother's name? My brother's name is Curtis, and you know, my mother made Curtis and me read lots of books when we were growing up. And all of her friends said, "You can't make boys stay in the house and read books. They'll grow up and they'll hate you." And I used to overhear them, and I would say, "Mother, you know they're right." But she persisted. And one of her sons became a brain surgeon, and one became a rocket scientist. So I think maybe she knew what she was talking about. Well, I think we need to move on to the second part. So you guys have been great. We appreciate you, and best wishes, and God bless you all.
Keep getting those A's.
Go down and sit in the audience.
Yep, thank you. As soon as.
Well, weren't they a good audience for young people? Absolutely. We love them. All right, well, I'm going to give you all a chance to ask some questions after I speak a little bit. But, you know, that book that we read to the young people, 250 copies of that are going to be coming right here to this place for some of our young people. And as part of ACI, which is the American Cornerstone Institute, which is what I'm doing these days, you know, I thought I was going to retire. after the election last year. I failed retirement the first time. I said, this time I'm going to get it right. But looking at the direction of the country, just worrying about what's going to happen to the next generation. From HUD, who are really superstars, and I together formed the American Cornerstone Institute. And the purpose was to take the foundational pillars, the things that made America great, and to re-emphasize those things, because we have society that's pushing them into the background. And those things are our faith, of course, our liberty, our community, and the concept of life. So important that we honor life in our country. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Is that better? Oh my goodness, that's a lot better. Okay, so faith, liberty, community, and life. And then we added several components, one of which is the Little Patriots program, so that our young people are taught the real history of America. And when you go home today, look it up, littlepatriotslearning.com, K through 5 program, the basics of our history, but told with the proper perspective so that people come away knowing that we have a terrific nation and that we're very fortunate to be here. You know, my wife and I talk all the time about how fortunate we are to live in America. You know, we've visited 68 different countries, and we've lived overseas, and there's really no place quite like America. And there are some people who try to downgrade our nation and say we're evil and have caused all kind of problems. But if we were so evil, why are all these people trying to get in here? You know, they'd be trying to get out of here. And, you know, we're extraordinarily fortunate that we've had a lot of people who've worked very hard to make this a place of promise. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. There is no nation in the history of the world that has ever been perfect. And that's because all nations are inhabited by people. And people are not perfect, which is why they need a Savior. But we need not concern ourselves. And it's important to know your history and to learn from your history and to move forward with your history. But your history gives you your identity. And your identity is that thing upon which your beliefs are built. Beliefs like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Beliefs like one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beliefs that the promise exists for everyone. The potential to achieve in this country exists for everyone. You know, as a youngster, I wanted nothing more than to be a doctor. I just loved anything that had to do with medicine. If there was a program on the television or on the radio about medicine, I was right there like a magnet. I even liked going to the doctor's office. I would gladly get a shot just so I could smell those alcohol swabs, you know. I just loved anything to do with medicine. But you probably wouldn't have thought that I was going to be a doctor because I was a terrible student. I was like the worst student you've ever seen. Other students were glad that I was there because they never had to worry about getting the worst mark as long as I was there. And, You know, I remember they used to tease me all the time, call me names, call me dummy. I really didn't like it very much. Everybody thought I was stupid except for one person, my mother. She was always saying, Benjamin, you're much too smart to be bringing home grades like this. I brought them home anyway, but she was always saying that. She was persistent and she was encouraging. And, you know, the interesting thing about my mother, she had less than a third grade education, but she was probably the wisest person I've ever met. You know, some people think wisdom comes from schooling. I've seen a lot of PhDs who are total fools, I gotta tell you. And some people who never went to school who have a lot of wisdom. You know, common sense, which sometimes seems to be missing in our society today. But anyway, her cover was domestic. She was going into people's houses and cleaning them, but she was really a spy. Because she wanted to see what was going on in those homes. Why were they so successful? And she concluded that it was because they didn't watch a lot of TV and they read a lot of books. So she came home and imposed that on me and my brother. And we were not happy campers. I mean, in today's world, we would have called social services. They'd probably have taken her away in handcuffs, but those days you had to do it. And, you know, we started reading those books. I didn't like it much at first, but I started really enjoying it. I loved animals. I read every animal book in the Detroit Public Libraries. And then I started reading about plants. And then I started reading about rocks. Because we lived near the railroad tracks. And what is there along the railroad tracks? Lots of rocks. I would bring boxes of rocks home, get my books out. Pretty soon I could tell you the name of virtually any rock, where it came from, how it was formed. Still in the 5th grade, still the dummy. But one day the science teacher walked in and he held up a big black shiny rock. He said, "Can anybody tell me what this is?" Well, I never raised my hand. I never answered any questions. So I waited for one of the smart kids to raise their hand. And none of them did. So I waited for one of the dumb kids to raise their hand. And none of them did. And I said, this is my big chance. And up went my hand, and everybody turned around. They said, Benny's got his hand up. Oh, this is going to be good. And the teacher was shocked. He said, Benny? I said, Mr. Jake, that's obsidian. And there was silence in the room because it sounded good. They didn't know whether it was right or wrong. They didn't know whether they should be laughing or what. And the teacher said, that's right, it is obsidian. And I said, obsidian is formed after a volcanic eruption, and the lava flows down and hits the water. There's a supercooling process. The elements coalesce, the surface is glazed up. They were all staring at me. They couldn't believe all this geological information spewing forth from the mouth of the dummy. But I was perhaps the most amazed person, because it dawned on me at that moment that I was no dummy at all. I said, Carson, the reason you knew the answers is because you were reading the books. I said, aren't you tired of being called a dummy? I said, what if you read books about all your subjects? Can you imagine the impact? And from that point on, you never caught me without a book. My new nickname was Bookworm. I was reading constantly, all the time. Within the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class, much to the consternation of all the ones who used to tease me and call me names, who were now coming to me saying, Benny, 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 how do you work this problem? And I would say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was perhaps a little obnoxious. But it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But you know, I had a really complete transformation of my thinking at that point. Because, you know, I used to listen to people who would say, oh, you can't achieve, oh, the system is stacked against you, oh, this, that, and the other. But, you know, as I started reading about explorers and scientists and surgeons and entrepreneurs, I began to understand something that was very important. And that is that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. It's not somebody else. Nobody else can control your life. Only you can control it. If you think you're a victim, you're a victim. And we really need, in this society in which we live, to get away from thinking about oppressors and victims. And there seems to be an element in our society today that is bent on creating division and hatred. What a newsflash. We, the American people, are not each other's enemies. And that is such an important concept. This nation cannot be destroyed by China or Russia or Iran or North Korea or anybody, but it can be destroyed by us. And that's why Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. That was repeated by Abraham Lincoln. There are those who understand the only way to bring down the United States of America is to create division and hatred and make us think that there's something wrong with our nation and therefore we need to change everything. Don't fall for it. This is an amazing country with amazing opportunities for everybody. Can we make more progress? Absolutely. But isn't it better to build on your progress than to just hark back to any mistakes that you've made? You have a young person who you want to achieve. Do you encourage them based on the progress they're making? Or do you spend all your time telling them how horrible they are? I think you'll have two very different outcomes in that situation. And the same thing goes for a nation. And we need to be concentrating on how we come together. Well, fortunately for me, you know, I was able to go on through college, medical school. But when I got to medical school, I thought all of my troubles were over. It was going to be wonderful. But I did terribly on the first set of comprehensive exams, about 6 weeks into medical school. I did so badly that my counselor encouraged me to drop out of medical school. This is the person who's supposed to help me get through. He says, you're not cut out to be a doctor. And you're just going to torment yourself and everybody else. Why don't you drop out? We'll help you get into another discipline. I was devastated. Since I was 8 years old, the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a doctor. I finally get to medical school, and the person who's supposed to help me get through says drop out. And I just said, Lord, please help me to figure out what to do. And I started thinking back over my academic career. I said, what kind of courses have you always struggled with? What kind of courses have you always done very well with? And I realized that I did very well with courses where I did a lot of reading. And I struggled in courses where I listened to a lot of boring lectures. Because I don't get anything out of boring lectures, zero. And yet I was sitting in 6 to 8 hours worth of boring lectures every day. So I made an executive decision to skip the boring lectures and to spend that time reading. The rest of medical school was a snap after that. And years later, when I went back to my medical school as the commencement speaker, I was looking for that counselor because I was going to tell him he wasn't cut out to be a counselor. Because, you know, there are some people who are just negative, negative, negative. They can always tell you what won't work. They never seem to invest any time in encouraging people and in helping people find the right way to do things. And that's what we all need to do in our spheres of influence. Be encouragers. Be people who help those around us. And, you know, particularly young people in the audience, do not follow the lead of people in my generation who are mean and nasty to each other, who get in their respective corners and hurl hand grenades at each other. We don't need to do that. What we do need to do is learn how to communicate with each other, to sit down and talk. You know, what happens when people get married and then divorced? You know, before they're getting married in their honeymoon stage, they can't stand to be away from each other. They're always calling each other. Everything is just wonderful. By the time they're ready to get divorced, they don't talk to each other, have nothing to say to each other. The next thing you know, their spouse is the devil incarnate. That's what happens when people stop talking and they stop communicating. It's such an important concept, not only in marriage, but for society at large, and particularly for a society that's composed of people from different backgrounds with different philosophies. People who have different thoughts can coexist only if they're willing to talk to each other, if they're willing to work out compromise and ways that they can do things. Not a compromise in principles, but a compromise in methods. There are different ways of doing things. And that's why we have these amazing brains, so that we can figure those kinds of things out. So that's kind of the message that I want to leave you with, along with my philosophy for success. It's called Think Big. Each one of those letters means something special. The T is for talent, which God gave to every single person. Not just the ability to sing and dance and throw a ball, nothing wrong with those things. But intellectual talent, that is really the thing that distinguishes human beings from everybody, from all other creatures. The H is for honesty. Lead a clean and honest life. If you don't put skeletons in the closet, they can't come back out to haunt you. Makes your life a whole lot easier when you don't have to worry about that tap on the shoulder. Remember what you did? If you don't do it, you can't remember what you did. The I is for insight, which comes from listening to people who have already gone where you're trying to go. Learn from their triumphs and mistakes. A person who can learn from somebody else's mistakes and doesn't have to make them themselves, boy, they can go a lot further, a lot faster than anybody else. It's called wisdom. The N is for nice. Be nice to people. Because once they get over their suspicion of why you're being nice, they'll be nice to you. And just give it a try. Think about somebody you know that you never speak to, that you're never nice to, and just make it your business to be really nice to that person and see how they react. It's really kind of fun because you kind of shock them a little bit. But it's also, you'll find out pretty quickly, it's a lot nicer. It's a lot more fun to be nice to people than it is to be mean to people. And that means when you're driving home today and somebody puts their blinking light on, don't speed up. Slow down. It means they want to get over, Doesn't mean speed up and make sure that they can't get in there, you know? Come on. And you're going to your car, and the parking lot is full of cars, and 3 people are following you in their car because they want your parking space. When you get in the car, don't pull down the mirror and open the glove box. Just get out of the space and let them have it. You know? Don't have to revel in your power, you know. But, you know, I'm talking about thinking about others first. What kind of society could we have if we really begin to emphasize that again? And we can do it. This is America. The K is for knowledge, which is the thing that makes you into a more valuable person. The B is for books, which is how you get that knowledge. The second I is for in-depth learning, as opposed to superficial learners. Superficial learners are people who cram a lot of stuff in before a test, sometimes do okay, and 3 weeks later know nothing. I'm sure there's no one here like that. But we really can't afford to do that because China and India have 4 times as many people as we do. We have to compete against them in the future. We cannot waste any of our people. We got to get everybody up to snuff. And the last letter, G, is for God. You know, there are a lot of people trying to push God out of our society. I wonder if those people recognize that the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag says we are one nation under God. Do they realize that our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, talks about certain unalienable rights given to us by our Creator, a.k.a. God? That on the courtrooms, many of our courtrooms, it says, "In God we trust" on the wall. Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, "In God we trust." So if it's in our founding document, it's in our flag, it's in our courts, and it's on our money, but we're not supposed to talk about it, what in the world is that? In medicine, we call it schizophrenia. And we need to recognize that it's okay to live by godly principles of loving your neighbor, caring about those in need, developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, having values and principles that govern your life. And if we do that, not only will we have a successful nation, but we will have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Dr. Carson has to leave at 11:45, and he's got some big bad boys back there going to make sure that happens. So, but at this time, you can line up here if you want to get something for him to sign and a photo opportunity, and then just leave the stage. We don't have handrails, but at 11:45, it's over. So go ahead and come on up here. Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, in the back. Yes. Oh, okay. Want to come up here? All right. I see one of the guys coming up here. Right. If you do come up here, we don't need your life story. Just get a picture and we'll get going. Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Carson, I'll be brief. First, thank you for your presence today. I appreciate your demeanor and your emphasis on charitable communication,
Yes.
the ability to disagree but do so charitably. Brian Stevenson is another individual who I feel embodies that. I went to Montgomery, Alabama this summer to visit the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. The entrance,
Yes.
Dr. King is quoted as saying, "Peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice."
Yes.
And Mr. Stevenson's thesis is essentially that slavery hasn't ended but evolved from slavery to Jim Crow to New Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and he would suggest that we've not sufficiently told the story of our country as it relates to our history of racial injustice. which I feel is a little bit different than your perspective. I feel that you've suggested that our country is great but imperfect, and you've talked about your accounting of our history. So just would appreciate your perspective on Mr. Stevenson's.
Well, I think it's very important to examine all the aspects of our history, and you'll see in our little patriotslearning.com that is not glossed over, but it is put into perspective. There are those who want people to believe that America is unique because of slavery. And the fact of the matter is, slavery has existed in every society since the beginning of human history. And even today, there are more slaves in the world today than there have ever been. Sexual slaves, human trafficking. The United States is particularly guilty of being the source. People who feed on that kind of thing. We need to be concerned about it. We need to learn from it. We need to learn from the past so that we can stop what's going on today. But we also need to recognize that we've made an enormous amount of progress. There are those who don't want to confess to that. But when I was a kid and a black person came on television who was not a servant, it was a big deal. Everybody came running into the living room to watch. Now you have black generals and admirals and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and university presidents, even including Ivy League schools. We've had a black president elected twice, a black vice president. I mean, to say that we're not making any progress is absolute foolishness. But we do have to learn from the things that have happened. As I said before, our history is so important in terms of giving us an identity. And first thing you'll notice that the Taliban and ISIS, when they go into a place, they destroy the history. We don't want to destroy our history. We want to learn from our history and advance from our history.
Thank you. Hey. What advice would you want to give for people desiring to go into the medical field?
I would say learn how you learn. Because that's why I had trouble in the beginning, because I was trying to fit myself into other people's learning style. And when I learned how I learned, it made all the difference. The other thing that worked for me was repetition. So I had thousands and thousands of flashcards. And I carried around flashcards in my pocket all the time. My second year in medical school, my brother lived with me. And he was in the School of Engineering. And he even knew all the bacteria and what they were sensitive to, because I was always whipping these cards out. So learning how you learn, big, big deal.
And what are you doing December 3rd and 4th? Because we have a play.
I happen to know that I'll be in Florida doing some very important things that time.
What's your engineer's, never mind. What's your rocket science brother's name?
His name is Curtis.
Oh.
Yeah. And he was always extremely good at math.
What inspired you to write your book?
People kept telling me to write a book. And I kept saying, I don't want to write a book. And then publishers start coming to me saying, you should write a book. And finally I said, okay, I'll write a book. And the first book, Gifted Hands, they said, this is really good. As an autobiography, it will probably sell 14,000 copies, which is a good sell for an autobiography. It sold over 2 million.
The old guy, I got to ask you a question. Do you still practice medicine?
No, I retired back.
You can't retire.
I did.
I'm sorry.
Somebody told me that neurosurgeons die early. And I didn't believe them, so I wrote down the name of the last 10 that I knew who died, calculate the average age of death, and it was 61. So I said, when I turn 61, if I'm still alive, I will retire. And I did, but obviously I failed retirement.
I'd like to thank you for starting the American Cornerstone Institute.
Thank you.
And I am a patriot, and I worry about patriotism in our country today. What can we, as educators and as Christians do to stop the fighting and to stop the growth of nationalism?
Well, thank you for that question. That's the very reason that we started American Cornerstone. And I would encourage you to go to americancornerstone.org. You'll find an enormous number of resources there that will help with that very issue. And last but not least,
I want to know what hospital you were born in.
I was born in Sunbeam Hospital in the River Ridge section of Detroit.
2 months before me.
Fantastic.
I was born in Detroit too.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen patterns of numbers in the Bible that could help you?
Well, I've seen a lot of things in the Bible that were helpful to me. I start every day reading from the Bible. I end every day reading from the Bible. Have done that since I was 14.
The numbers, I have a card I'd like to give you, but the number 33 is very important to me. If you take all the chapters, you got 3 times 3 times 33 plus 3 times 3 times 33 plus 1 because there's an odd amount, plus 3 times 3 times 33 plus 3 times 3 times 33, and you're at the end. The middle chapter there also has 33 words. So's your spine. That's the spine of the Bible, and that's your spine.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I thought you might like that.
And Jesus was 33 when he was crucified.
That's very, very important. He said he'd reveal all of his enemies to us, and I'm thinking that I need to let you know that he's shown me a lot of secret societies that are enemies to our country. And they all have 33s related to them.
Interesting.
And
Well, pass that card to my wife. She's right behind you. Thank you.